The Falcons' late game magic fizzles in a 20-6 loss to the Detroit Lions.
You are Locked On Falcons, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, everyone, to another illustrious episode of the Locked On Falcons podcast, your daily Atlanta Falcons podcast, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs, who are going to help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So, guys, if you don't know me, I'm your very humble host, Aaron Freeman. Covered the Falcons for many years, formerly at FalcFans.com, still going strong on this illustrious podcast. You may know me as Sirius Black. You may also know me as Mr. Holier Than Thou. And you may also know me as Mr. Drew. My friends call me Negative Nancy. You can call me Mr. Drew, but you can become one of my friends by becoming an everydayer of this illustrious podcast. And all you got to do is subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts. So it was not a great day, not an illustrious day for the Atlanta Falcons. It kind of boiled down to one drive where the Falcons really had a chance to get back into this game after playing from behind for most of it. It was a Jessie Bates interception at the end of the third quarter to start the fourth quarter, with the Falcons down 13-3 at that point in time, a chance to cut it to one score. It felt like, hey, we're going to get that fourth quarter magic that we've gotten the first 2 weeks, where Desmond Ritter and company, after, three iffy quarters of play on offense and elsewhere, they're going to put it together, get us a drive, and get us back in this game. And that was not the case. The Falcons went with a 4 and out to start the fourth quarter. Ritter missed throws to Drake London on third and fourth down. It was sort of low on a comeback to London on third down, on one of the rare third and shorts that they had in this game. More on that later. And then it seemed like him and London were not on the same page, where London seemed to break inside on a curl and Ritter threw outside on the fourth down. And that kind of summed up the Falcons' day offensively. Just did not see a lot of the quarterbacks and receivers being on the same page. Had the Falcons scored a touchdown on a drive following that Bates interception, potentially they cut the lead to 13-10. But instead they give the ball back to the Lions, and the Lions just basically out Falcon the Falcon and just pound the ball down their throat, and then wind up scoring to push their lead 20-3. And that was pretty much a wrap after that. And, the Lions owe a lot of their success of winning this game to shutting down the Falcons run game. They were the first team in a long time to shut down the Falcons run game, with the Falcons finishing with only 44 yards rushing. They had, going into this game, the second longest active streak of 100+ yard gains, behind Baltimore, who had 18. The Falcons had 17 going into this game. That got snapped. Didn't really think it was possible, right? That someone was going to be able to shut that down. It'll be interesting to go back and revisit the film. Was it just simply the Lions, out schemed them, or they were just kicking their butts up front? But it seemed to create a snowball effect with the Falcons really unable to get anything going offensively on early downs. And that led to a lot of third and longs, right? And the Falcons really struggled to convert a lot of those. They finished this game, 4-14 on third downs. And they were 0 for 1 on fourth downs, but they, until like the second to last drive of the fourth quarter, they were 1 for 10 on third downs. And so they converted like 3 on that penultimate drive to make that number look a little bit better. And so the Falcons couldn't really sustain any offense in this game. And the Lions were successful in getting the Falcons off schedule, and the Falcons just really could never get back on schedule. And a lot of that is owed to their offensive line. Some of that's owed to their, quarterback play. We'll talk more about Ritter later on, but let's talk about the offensive line play, right? The Lions, at least in pass protection, absolutely kicked the Falcons' butts up front. We talked about going into this game, the Lions looking to sort of get right with, only having 1 sack in their first 2 games and really wanted to get after the passer. They got 7 sacks today. So they definitely got right. We were kind of hoping, or at least I was hoping, that the Falcons would have their get right game, because their offensive line hadn't played well in the first 2 games and didn't look a lot better in this one, giving up 7 sacks. I had a listener on the subtext, text me earlier this week being like, hey, I don't know about this Aiden Hutchinson guy. I feel like he's being overhyped. And I'm like, I don't think you're watching the film, my guy. And clearly, I think that person's probably second guessing that opinion at this point, because Hutchinson was kind of all over the place in this game. He finished with 2 sacks on the final 2 drives. He beat Jake Matthews on a 6-spin move on the penultimate drive, and then he beat Matthew Bergeron to basically ice the game, beating Bergeron, stripping Desmond Ritter, recovering the fumble, and then the Lions went into basically victory formation. He was giving Caleb McGarry fits most of the times when I saw those guys one-on-one against each other, and we saw Detroit just kind of move him all around the defensive line. So he's definitely living up to the hype of being that number 2 overall pick. Next week, the Falcons will face the number 1 overall pick from that same draft in Trayvon Walker against the Jaguars. So we'll see if he can sort of pick up where Hutchinson left off. But I don't think overall it was all bad for the Falcons. I think, the positive from this game is the defense, I thought, was solid for the most part. Obviously, they weren't good enough to win, but I think that's more on the offense than, the defense certainly was. I think, no, the defense was good enough to win. The offense just didn't basically do their job, right? That to hold Detroit, a pretty good Lions offense, to 13 points through 3 quarters is certainly what you would have absolutely taken that if I told you that going into the Sunday. Like, that would be a good performance. And you just thought the offense would do a little bit more than what they actually did. I thought the defensive line showed up. This was their best game to date. Grady Jarrett had his breakout game of the season, finished with 3 quarterback hits. Onyemata had 2 more. Bud Dupree had a couple of pressures in this game. They took advantage of the Lions' weaknesses up front. We knew Taylor Decker, the left tackle for the Lions, Hala Vaitai, the right guard, were out of the lineup. They moved Penei Sewell to the left side. They gave Sewell some fits. He had a couple of holding calls in this game. Their replacement in right tackle, Matt Nelson, exited the game early. His replacement, Dan Skipper, also exited the game. So they were down to their 3rd string right tackle, and Kobe Sorsdahl, a rookie guard. Unfortunately, the Falcons weren't able to capitalize on the amount of pressure that they were generating in this game because they finished with no sacks. But they were able to get 9 quarterback hits in this game. And again, I know people only care about the sacks and whatnot, but it was nice to see this defensive line get after the quarterback, because we haven't really seen them do that this season. They've been far too reliant, I think, on blitzes and dialing up pressure in order to get after the quarterback. So it was nice to see them being able to pressure the quarterback with 4. So I feel like that was a positive step for this defensive front. And I think they can come out of this game, even though they'll probably be disappointed with losing, being like, hey, we stepped up and did our jobs. Obviously, you want to get more opportunity to get the quarterback down, but, Jared Goff is a veteran quarterback. He's going to get rid of that football pretty quickly. But, the secondary gave up some plays early on. But again, overall, I think the defense battled back. And of course, Jessie Bates had that interception going into the 4th quarter. And unfortunately, the Falcons could not take advantage with that 4th quarter magic. And so we'll talk a little bit more about Desmond Ritter and the offensive struggles, especially through the air, as we continue today's Locked On Falcons. So we know that the Falcons' success depends on having the right team around their young quarterback, and the same is true for your small business. And fortunately for you, you don't have to worry about Aiden Hutchinson roaming the lobby as you're trying to interview new candidates. The Falcons are worried about Aiden Hutchinson roaming that line of scrimmage. All you have to do is go to LinkedIn Jobs. They'll help you find the right people for your team faster and for free. It's so easy to spread the word when you're hiring on LinkedIn Jobs, and then they'll give you simple tools like screening questions. So it's easy to focus on the candidates with the right skills and experience so that you can quickly prioritize who you want to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs is going to help you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNFL to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. So we saw Desmond Ritter drop back 45 times today. And that's clearly not the way that the Falcons want to play. They're not built to play that way. Maybe one day they'll be able to play that way and win games, but they certainly did not show that they are capable of that today. Ritter finished completing 21 of 38 passes for 55% of his pass attempts. He looked off for most of this game. I felt like his decision-making was a little bit better today than it had been the first 2 weeks, right? He did have one near interception late in the game. But that seemed like the only one. We'll see what the film says. And that's down from like 2 near interceptions in the first 2 games. So you take that as very minor progress, right? going from 2 bad decisions to 1 bad decision. But I think the accuracy concerns were apparent in this game, and there was a lot of miscommunication between him and his receivers. I don't have any, you know, strong takes about Ritter's performance. As I've said many times on this podcast over the offseason and summer, we're not going to do referendums each week on the show about Desmond Ritter and his status and his long-term ability to be the Falcons quarterback. It's going to play out over the course of the season. We'll evaluate him each and every week. We'll take it one game at a time. But, I think this was a winnable game for the Falcons because of the defense's performance, and the offense did not step up. And, I was, as you guys well know, if you've been an everydayer here, you knew I was skeptical of this team's ability to win on the road, right? That's the beauty of having low expectations is, when they fail to meet them, you're not necessarily as upset as other people. And so for me, it was one of those things where I wanted to, I needed to see it before I would believe that this team would do it. Young quarterbacks tend to struggle on the road based off of Desmond Ritter's limited sample size last year. That proved to be the case. And I needed to see him, step up on the road this year against the Detroit Lions, and he didn't necessarily do that. And so, no indications that Desmond Ritter is going to be the exception to the rule, at least up to through 7 career starts of being that rare young quarterback that is out there killing on the road. 4-0 at home so far, 0-3 on the road, kind of meets our sort of expectations. But if there's really any positive I can say about the offense, it was nice to see them get Kyle Pitts involved early in the game. That's really about it. Pitts and London combined for 15 targets. They only finished with 7 catches combined. And I would, I could only guess on how many of those 8, missed throws were on the quarterback, but it probably seemed like the majority of them were on the quarterback, not the receivers. So, that's where Ritter has to step up, and hopefully he'll do better next week on the road in London again against Jacksonville. They got blasted today by the Texans 37-17. I don't think anybody saw that coming. And we'll see if, next week is the get right game for this Falcons offensive line and for their offense. Again, low expectations. People get mad at me when I'm not necessarily over the moon when the team wins, just like I'm not super down on the team after a loss, right? I just kind of stay at a 5 out of 10, right? Like my philosophy, and has been long time philosophy, is team is never as good as you think they are. They're never as bad as you think they are. They're just kind of what they are. So, I think kudos goes to the Lions. I think they went out there and out executed the Falcons. They were a good football team. There's a reason why people have been hyping them up for all off season. And I think they went out there and showed it. Even with some of the injuries, they went out there and played above themselves. And I know there's going to be a lot of questions about Arthur Smith's play calling in this game. There always is after every loss, especially when the offense struggles. I didn't personally have major issues with it. I usually don't have as big an issue with play calling as other people do. My general rule is like, 65 offensive plays, which I think what the Falcons wound up having today. If you had issues with 3 play calls, that still would be an A, right? If you took a quiz and had 65 questions and you got 62 of them right, or even got 60 of them right, you'd still get an A or B plus on that quiz. So I don't, I'm not going to hammer him. Probably my only major critique, at least off the initial watching of the game live, and we'll see again. Maybe I'll have more criticisms after I rewatch the game Monday morning and then watch the all 22 later in the week. But, I think it took maybe a little too long for them to get Bijan involved in the offense. He didn't really get into the game until the second series. So, maybe next week you want to give him the first touch as opposed to that. But I appreciated the Falcons taking shots, trying to use the play action. They just didn't connect really on enough of those plays in this game. So, I don't think the play calling was probably as problematic as probably other people will see, but we'll see if that holds up over further scrutiny. I just think ultimately the Falcons just didn't execute their offense in the way that they drew it up, which is, typically the case in a loss. So we'll recap this game to wrap up, give you a summary and sort of give you some of my other takeaways. We did get Jeff Okudah coming back. We get one player back. Maybe we're losing another player in Troy Anderson. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So we'll see how that goes for the Falcons, and we'll wrap up the highs, the lows, the roller coaster of this game to close out today's Rapid Reaction Podcast. So I don't know about you guys, but sometimes I'll be on Twitter or other social media accounts and I'll be scrolling late at night and I'll see someone post some delicious looking food and I'll be like, man, I really want some delicious looking food. Like recently someone posted a picture of calamari and I was like, I want some calamari. And you can satisfy those late night cravings by hitting up DoorDash, right? And not only can you trust DoorDash to deliver those restaurant favorites like calamari or whatever's you're craving late at night, but you can also trust DoorDash to deliver your groceries, right? I love DoorDash personally because they're the only spot that my local wing spot delivers from. And I constantly use them on Wednesdays for Wing Wednesdays and whatnot. And, if you're constantly, getting your food delivered or groceries delivered, you can get even greater value by paying virtually nothing with $0 delivery fees for eligible orders when you get a Dash Pass membership. Now, you can also get 50% off your first DoorDash order and up to $20 value when you use our code LOCKEDONNFL at checkout. It's a limited time offer and terms apply, but that's $50% off, up to a $20, no minimum subtotal, and zero delivery fees on your first order when you download the DoorDash app in the App Store and enter code LOCKEDONNFL. Don't forget, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for 50% off your first order with DoorDash. So for those of you that missed the game and sort of the highs and the lows, or the lows and the highs, I guess is probably more accurate to put it for the Falcons. It was kind of a slow start for both teams offensively. They both started with 3 and outs. Then the Falcons gave up 2 sacks on their second series. The Lions responded with a field goal drive of their own to take a 3-0 lead. And then the Falcons answered with a field goal of their own to start the second quarter. The Lions then got back on the scoreboard. Richie Grant gave up a big play to Lions tight end Sam Laporta on a 45-yard touchdown strike. Laporta basically shook him, on a deep post or a double move. And as we discussed during the week in the All 22 review on Wednesday, Richie Grant hasn't been great as a deep safety this year, and that showed up once again in this game. Now, the Falcons, after that score, you kind of needed them to respond. They didn't. They got a 3 and out. Then the Lions went on a long drive. The Falcons' red zone defense did step up, though, get a stop, force a 24-yard field goal. And, that gave the Lions a 13-3 lead with 2 minutes left to go in the first half. And the Falcons had 2 possessions in the final 2 minutes to get points on the board, and they failed to do so. Lions got the ball to start the second half. The Falcons did force a 3 and out. The Falcons did start to get their run game going on their opening drive of the third quarter, but then Younghoe Koo missed a 47-yard field goal, and the Falcons failed to capitalize on that. Again, the defense still hung in there. The front started to really sort of assert their will and get after Jared Goff on the next play, on the next drive, and force a Lions punt. Then they kind of traded series until the final play of the third quarter, where Jessie Bates snagged an interception on an overthrow from Jared Goff. As stated earlier, the Falcons failed to capitalize on that favorable field position in Lions territory with a 4 and out. Then the Lions went smash mouth, feeding Jahmyr Gibbs, and then Jared Goff capped off that drive to score on a 3-yard quarterback keeper to give the Lions a 20-3 lead with 10 minutes left. Falcons still had a chance, right? They needed a quick score on their subsequent drive. They did not get that. They basically dinked and dunked their way down the field, bled 5 minutes of the remaining 10 minutes on the clock, and then wound up having to settle for a field goal to cut the lead to 20-6. And then the Falcons defense again got another stop just before the 2-minute warning. But the Falcons had to burn all their timeouts to do so. And then, Ritter nearly threw that pick on a seam ball to Jonnu Smith. And then Aiden Hutchinson beat Bergeron for that sack strip, and the Lions recovered and then went into victory formation. So clearly, again, I think the back and forth shows that this defense, when they needed to get stops, they got those stops, and the offense just failed to take advantage of that. And so that's sort of the big takeaway of the game. So again, I don't think it should be a surprise that the offense is, with a young quarterback on the road, without the run game getting going, like the offense struggled today. I don't know if play calling had much to do with that, but again, we'll see how that holds up. But, the last little tidbits we'll talk about, Troy Anderson did get shaken up on I think the penultimate Lions drive or the final Lions drive, and then was seen with his arm in a sling after the game. So hopefully we'll get an update on that on tomorrow. Jeff Okudah did make his return to the lineup. He was splitting reps with Trey Flowers. It did seem like Flowers got the majority of the reps, but they were substituting Okudah in at times. And I didn't notice Okudah in this game when I did, like he was doing good things. So that's a positive sign. So hopefully he'll be ready to go full bore, I guess you could say, next week against the Jaguars, where I think, going up against arguably a better receiver core, no slouch to Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's really good. But you got Calvin Ridley, you got Christian Kirk, Zay Jones. Is Zay Jones still in Jacksonville and healthy? I don't know. But we'll see how they match up next week. So with Trevor Lawrence, you need to have that coverage on the back end. So hopefully next week the Falcons will be able to establish the run a little bit better than they did Sunday. And if they do, I think they'll certainly have a chance to win that game. I think on paper, the matchup between the Falcons and Jaguars is very similar to the matchup between the Falcons and Lions. I think the Jaguars and Lions are similar teams, right? They have this sort of explosive everyday running back, Jahmyr Gibbs versus Travis Etienne, St. Brown is their number one. Calvin Ridley is Jacksonville's. They have a capable but not an elite tight end, Sam Laporta versus Evan Ingram. I think the biggest difference is probably you probably feel generally a little bit more afraid of Trevor Lawrence than Jared Goff, although I think Lawrence hasn't necessarily lived up to that. Goff seems to be probably the steadier of the two quarterbacks. But we know Trevor Lawrence is very capable of very high highs, but he's probably also capable of much lower lows. And that seems to be the case, at least, looking at the Jaguars from afar. I haven't really paid that much attention to him this year. So that will be something that I will go back and rewatch their games against Kansas City and Houston to see what their formula for success was against them. But, the formula for the Falcons is the same every week. They're a team that needs to win along the trenches at the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They're not really built to be this high flying, explosive, dynamic offense. Again, much to the chagrin, I think, of a lot of folks. It's not to say that their skill position players aren't very talented. Their big three in London and Pitts and Bijan are very capable. But as we saw today, if one of those guys isn't dominating, at least one of those guys isn't dominating, there isn't a whole lot that the Falcons are going to be able to throw at defenses that are really going to challenge them in major ways. So that's been part of the reason why I've been probably a little bit more skeptical of the Falcons than many of you guys after their 2-0 start, just because I think they're good along the line of scrimmage, but they're not great along the line of scrimmage to feel super confident that each and every week they're going to go out there and win every single game and dominate every single opponent. The Lions are also very good in the trenches. And so a lot of these games have been even matches, and that's why they've been so close going into the final quarter. And fortunately for the Falcons at home in the 2 wins, they were able to make the plays in the fourth quarter to win those games. And this week on the road, they weren't able to make those plays. And, that's just the nature of the beast in the NFL. Some weeks you'll have it, some weeks you don't. That's why it's any given Sunday each and every week. And, looking at the scoreboard this weekend, it was a lot of surprising outcomes. Gardner Minshew going on the road, beating the Ravens, the Texans destroying the Jaguars, at least based off of the scoreboard. Miami absolutely annihilated Denver this game, dropped a 70 burger on them. You don't see that really ever. We've been talking about Miami sort of offhand, as the best offense in the league, and boy, oh goodness gracious. So I would love to watch the film of that game. So maybe that'll be something I'll do later this weekend. But I'm eager to hear you guys sound off in the comments, as I'm sure many of you already have, telling who needs to be benched, who needs to be fired, who needs to be cut, who needs to be traded after each loss. I'm sure the tankers are out there thumping their chest as well. We got to go get that number 1 pick because the season's over. And it's okay, this is why this is why I underreact to wins, and this is why I don't overreact to losses. It's just okay, it's week 3, about to be week 4. It's a long season, so we'll see. We'll see what my philosophy is usually around week 4, week 5, week 6. You kind of know what your team is, and you can sort of make more definitive judgments. We're still waiting for the offense the passing game at least to get going. We were hoping, 3 or 4 weeks. We went into the season it takes about 3 or 4 weeks. Didn't really get that in week 3, so hopefully we get that in week 4. So, if not, then we'll just basically say, well, 3 or 4 weeks with a veteran quarterback, 5 or 6 weeks with a young quarterback, and hopefully we'll figure it out. So that's it. Back to the drawing board for the Falcons. Get back to, their identity of running the football, but they weren't able to do that on this Sunday. So we'll be back tomorrow, guys. We'll see if I can get a guest to give their insight into this game as well. But continue to make Locked On Falcons your first listen. If you want to, vent a little bit, join the subtext, right? That's a thing where you can have that one-on-one conversation with me. You could text me. I'll send out my takes and stuff. Did a lot of pre and in-game analysis. It's only $4.99 a month, but the first 2 weeks are free. So if you're interested in that, just to try it out for a couple of weeks, for 14 days, you can do so just by clicking the link in the description below. And of course, you guys know where else to find me via social media on Locked On Falcons. You can hit me up in the Discord. There's Locked On Falcons link in the description below. Of course, you can vent via email to lockedonfalcons@mail.com. But that's going to do it for us here on today's Rapid Reaction. We'll, be back at it. Make sure you check out the Locked On Sports Atlanta football party, 2 p.m. Mondays. Hopefully, the plan is to do it every week with myself, Jarvis Davis, Tanisha Batiste, Locked On Sports Atlanta, and of course, everybody's favorite Atlanta Falcons, writer, Tori McElhaney, every Monday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So go check that out on Locked On Sports Atlanta YouTube and audio platform. So follow that wherever you can. So that's going to do it for us, guys. Really appreciate it. Till then.